is now no longer available. So you'll notice that I can reuse the same, forgive me, name.
You know,
now,
it's a silly analogy, and it's not entirely accurate, but sometimes the way I think of it is I think of when you're inside Windows Explorer and File Explorer, you can have the same file name in 2 different folders.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, when you're in this folder, that file name contains the contents that it has in that directory. And if you have the same file name in a different directory, you can have completely different contents.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like that. One function is one folder, it can have the name, and another one can have the same name.
Exactly. And you might be looking at all of this, and you might be thinking, well, you know, Christopher, for me, using the same names is a little bit confusing. And I could certainly see how that would be.
Sure.
But the couple of things that I want to mention is, number one, I mean, if it's a group of names, you may as well call it names. But not only that, if you're trying to make all of your variables uniquely named across your entire application, after a while, you're going to run out of names. You're going to run out of creative, A names, B names, C names, you know.
I have seen people, one thing I have seen that isn't too bad if it does bother you, is I have seen people who will do P_name or P name when it's a parameter.
Yeah.
So they'll do that as the parameter, so they remember that anything which is P names is the parameter that they define for the function. So that's the only, if you really feel you have to do it, that might be a compromise.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yep. So you'll notice that sure enough, this is now going to keep on running for me. Excellent. So now let's kind of keep on keeping on here. I'm going to go back to my slides, and let's break things down into returning data. So up until right now, what I've done is I've created functions that went off and did something for me. They wrote something out to the screen, which can certainly be, again, exactly what I'm looking for. But again, it's relatively limited because the only thing that it's going to be able to do is print out. What happens if I want, again, a little bit more flexibility? That maybe I would like to create a little function that can start prompting the user for the collection of names. And then once they're finished with entering in all of the different names, it will just give me that collection of names back, and then I can decide what I want to do next. So maybe I want to print it out. Maybe I want to write it out to a file. So I would have that option there because it will give me the value back.
And I would need this, I keep coming back to my date formatting challenge, right? I said one of my favorite functions to write is I will write a function that accepts a date value as a parameter, and it returns a nicely formatted string with the date formatted the way I like it. And that way my little function has all that str, p time, percent, whatever in it, but I just call my function that says format date. I pass it a date, and it gives me back a string formatted the way I like. And if my users ever change their mind about the way the date formatted, I just go change one line in my function, and I'm done.
And you know what's kind of funny here is I'm now regretting the challenge that I put together, that I really wish I would have put a challenge together of create a function to better format dates. I should have done that.
Let's make that the extra credit.
There we go. There's your extra credit
challenge. I like it.
All right. In any event, let's go in and kind of take a look at how this is going to look. And what you're going to notice, take a look at how it's going to look. What you're going to notice here is we've had our return before, and what return meant until now was exit. Well, now what we're going to do is we're going to use return and give it something. And what that will do is that will then send that back out to whoever it is that called it. So if we kind of break things down, you'll notice that down here I've got my little get message. So I'm going to pass in Christopher. It's going to do its work. And then message, sound effects and all, is going to go right down to there.
Nice.
So that is what's going to happen with our return value. Now, before I go back and do my demo, you'll notice there's my slide on scope. It came up earlier than here. But again, you know, after a while, you just can't always use different names. And again, you know, it's...
You can use the same file name in 2 different folders.
And sometimes that's what you need.
Yeah.
You know, keep using the same name when appropriate. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a look at how we can return back values here. So I want Visual Studio, and let's say I'm going to do this. I'm going to, let's just say def and get names.
Okay.
There we go. And don't forget your colon, Christopher. Let's just paste that into there. Okay. Now, for right now, I'm going to keep it a little bit simpler on myself. That you're going to notice that I'm just going to keep the exact same code that we had before. And then right here, I'm going to say return names. Now, you're going to notice I can return whatever I want.
Yep.
So I could actually return, Christopher, I could just return a string. If we had a date time, I could return back a date time. We could return 42. So the fact that we're returning a list, sometimes people look at that and go, well, wait a minute, that seems, a little more advanced because a list object is inherently more advanced. A list is more advanced than a number.
We saw that in the last module when we were looking at reading files.
Exactly. But you know what it is at the end of the day? It's still just a variable.
Yep.
So it's still just an item that I can pass around, so I can still return it just like I normally would. And then you'll notice that what I could do is I could say names equals get names. And now we're going to get the exact same behavior that we saw before. So now let me go ahead and hit start. Enter last guest. Again, let's go with Satya. We'll hit enter. And sure enough, there's Christopher, Susan, Danny, and Satya.
Cool. Do you know what? Can I make would you like to just take a second and maybe step through that code with the debugger so they can sort of see how it's hopping into the functions in the order of execution? Sometimes that's sort of interesting when you've got functions.
Yep. Okay. So what you're going to notice, I threw in the breakpoint here, is right now we're stopped on names equals get names. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit my little step into here, and you'll notice where that little yellow arrow is. You'll notice that the little yellow arrow is now inside of get names. Why? Because that's what I called. So I called get names, and so it automatically threw me into get names. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to step down one more, and now we've got our new name. Now we're going to go ahead and get the last guest. Let's go in and again add Satya. He doesn't return any of my emails.
The thing is, he probably would return our emails if we asked.
Might, yeah, exactly.
So we shouldn't say that. For all we know.
You're right. Yeah, I shouldn't say that.
I've never tried.
Never emailed them. It was really an attempt at humor there. Most of these jokes are just for my own entertainment. In any event, let's go back to Visual Studio here. And so now we've got our little append and then return names. Now watch this. When we return names, I want you to watch where the arrow goes. The arrow now goes back up to here. So now we're back inside of main. Let's go down one more step. Now we're at print names, and then now you'll notice when I go into print names that it's down there on print names, and now we've got our for loop and away it would go from there. And so I'm just going to kind of skip to the end, and you'll notice that it's printed out all the names.
Cool.
Perfect. Okay. Now, the last little thing that I just want to mention here, because I'm willing to bet this has come into the chat window, and if it hasn't, then I'm going to do it anyway. Let's. One of the things that Zoom It can do is put up a break timer, as we've seen. One of the other things that you could do here, get names, is just like before, you can call one function and add in another function. A lot of people were asking things like, well, could you do meaning of life equals int input, what is the answer, boom, 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 like that. So a lot of people were asking, could you go in and do that? And the answer, of course, was 100% yes. So could you do this? And the answer is 100% yes. That what you'll notice right here is paren and paren, that the parentheses are going to identify, kind of do this first. So the outer all the way to the inner. So it's going to, or other way around there, but it's going to call that get names first, and then it's going to call print names second. So you could absolutely do that. And whether or not you decide to do that is really up to you, that you really can start to get kind of fancy here, that if I maybe wrote a method that looked a little bit like this, maybe something like def get message name, could I go in and say return colon
Yep.
topic, if I go in and say return hello and name. Is that going to work? Absolutely. That you could go in and define that in line. And whether or not you decide to break things down into different variables, into different steps, is 100% based on your own comfort level. That I know a lot of advanced developers who will never do something like that, who will never do a calculation on the return line, that they will always create a variable and return the variable. Hey, you know what? If that's what makes sense to you, if that's how it's going to fit, go for it. 100%. Yep. Cool. Huh. Awesome.
You're rocking.
So, I want to close all this off, and here's my challenge, which the date one would have been a little bit better.
It's okay. That's going to be the extra. So the extra. So the extra credit challenge is going to be write a function that accepts a date and returns a nicely formatted string that shows a date the way you like to see dates displayed. So that's your extra credit challenge.
There's your extra credit challenge.
Now,
Here's
Christopher
your
has your regularly scheduled programming challenge.
Exactly. So the regularly scheduled one is, and what the whole thought process behind this was really kind of the point that I kept trying to make over and over and over again as we went through all of this, which was, the whole goal of functions is to try and simplify things, is to try and make reusable blocks of code that you can just kind of keep going back to help simplify things. So imagine a scenario where all you want to do is write some data out to a file. So what are you going to need? You're going to need two things. You're going to need the data, and you're going to need the file name. And could I sit down and write that in a bit of code? Sure. But you know what? If I put that inside of a function, then all I have to do is call that function. And that's exactly the challenge here, is create a function to simplify writing to files. Set it up to accept parameters, one for the text to write, one for the name of the file, and then of course add the code that's going to write the text out to the file that was specified. And you know, if you wanted to, now you could start to get all crazy with the cheese product that comes out of a can, and maybe start adding in input statements where you could then prompt the user, give me the text, give me the name of the file. So you could really take this and kind of keep building upon this. But again, the main takeaway that I want you to get, the whole goal, is that it's there to help make your life easier. So what we've seen, the congratulations slide here, is you now have the ability to save yourself some time by putting those statements into functions. It's going to simplify your code, it's going to simplify debugging, it's going to simplify your updates.
Absolutely. And in the end, it's going to allow you to be a better lazy programmer.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Now, I don't know about you, Susan, but at least periodically when I write code, something goes wrong.
I would say never, but I think I'd be struck down by lightning.
Yeah, and in fact, both of us have had things go wrong.
You've seen us have things go wrong right here.
There's video evidence of us.
So I think what better way to wrap up our day than by talking about what can we do when we're coding to deal with things that go wrong in our code, so we don't just get nasty error messages spewing all over the screen, and how do we deal with those? And I think when we're done that as well, I think we need a little more homework.
Okay. Yeah, more homework. All right. With that, let's go ahead and take 10, and we'll come on back with the last module of the day. Stick with us.
See you soon. And we're back.
And we are back. Yeah, last one. For those of you just joining us, you've missed a fantastic day here, a couple of days on Introduction to Programming with Python. It is worth noting that this will be available in 2 weeks, but we'll talk more about that at the end of this module. Yep. The last little introduction that I'm going to do one last time. Susan Iback is over there, ladies and gentlemen. I am merely Christopher Harrison, and Susan, I'm just going to let you take it from here. No segue.
Right, let's jump into this.
Go.
Yeah, we've been looking at all sorts of different coding situations and all kinds of different problems we could solve with code. We've been learning different syntax so we could solve more and more complex problems. But one of the things we haven't done yet, and we've even actually encountered some situations where we were writing code and there were errors occurring, but we really haven't talked about what do you do to handle errors that occur in your code. So in order to write an elegant solution to a problem, it is nice to be able to do error handling. Can you write code and solve problems without error handling, yes, but is really much more elegant and nicer experience for a user if you have good error handling. So we just want to talk a bit about how do you do that with your code. So if we hop to the slides here, even the best laid plans can go wrong. You go off, you create the shopping list, and then you get to the grocery store and realize you left your shopping list at home. Oh, I've never done that one. Sometimes I'm like, I know, I'll be smart. I'll put the list on my phone. Oh, and I leave my phone at home. You go out and you go out to buy a pair of shoes. You spend all that time trying on different running shoes, and then they discover they don't have it in your size. Just after you find the perfect pair.
My habit is, because I'll often run here before work, so I'll bring my work clothes as well, and I frequently forget my work shoes.
So you end up spending the day in the runners.
In my running shoes, yeah, exactly.
Related story, just a brief side, I'll get right back to the code. But I did one time, I used to travel a lot for work. I used to teach a lot of programming courses, and I would travel and I would pack the dress shoes for the work. And I had a really grungy pair of running shoes, and this is when I wore a full suit.
Okay.
With the skirt and the blazer, and I got to the training center and realized I had no dress shoes. So actually, no, I had packed dress shoes, but I packed one black and one blue, and they were both for the left foot. So I ended up teaching the entire course wearing a nice, beautiful business suit and a really grungy pair of running shoes.
I love every bit of that. That's
said
funny.
The best laid plans do go wrong. I was trying not to wake up my husband when I was packing, so I grabbed two shoes and apparently both left foot.
Yep.
You decide you need to call somebody and you discover your cell phone battery is dead. No matter what we plan for, things will go wrong. And that's going to be true when we're writing code as well. So things that go wrong when we're writing programs as well. So some of the scenarios you might have, you're writing code that's going to read a file. The file's not there. I have run into that one so many times. I used to write programs that would move file from one location to another.
Exactly.
And it would read a file from one location, move it over, and load it into a database, a very common sort of scenario.
Yep.
Somebody sends me a file, I take it and I put it in my database.
Exactly. And those are the types of things that you don't have control over.
Yeah.
When I'm writing the program, if I have a mistake in my code, that's me. But if I'm trying to read from a file, there's no guarantee that file is going to be there tomorrow.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Yeah, exactly.
So we often run into that scenario. So we need to be able to sort of handle that sort of error. You might have a situation where you ask a user to enter a date, and you tell them, "Hey, enter it as day, month, year," but they enter it as year, month, day. So, or they specify a date like the 30th of February. You go, wait a second, that's not going to work. So you have to be able to handle those situations in code. Or you are doing math in your program and you hit the common programming error, the divide by zero. That one comes up quite common.
Absolutely.
So there's different types of errors you can actually run into when you're writing your code. First of all, there are syntax errors. And I think I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that everybody out there who's been practicing has had a syntax error. I know we've had several in doing our examples. Christopher's like, "Oh, I forgot the colon." Susan, you've got the parentheses around the print statement. These are great examples of syntax errors. Now, the wonderful thing about working inside a tool like Visual Studio is Visual Studio will highlight your syntax errors with that little red squiggly line. And you know what I love about that? It's the same thing you see with spell check in Word. We're actually used to the red squiggly meaning, go look here, you have a mistake here.
You have a problem here.
It's too bad they don't give you the autocorrect like they do for spell check.
Yeah,
That'd be
kidding.
nice. Maybe that's coming later. From IntelliSense, we could have a spell check autocorrect for our code. But no, when you see a red squiggly in your code, that's a hint that you have a typo somewhere. So if you actually look at this example here on the screen, you can actually see hello world, and what I've done is I've forgotten one of my quotes. So I forgot to put my opening quote, if I show here, I forgot to put an opening quote right here, so I get this squiggly line. I'll give you a little tip too, and I don't know if you've noticed this, Christopher, but sometimes where the squiggly line appears isn't exactly what the error is.
Exactly, but the way that I use it is basically is the end point. So I'll start there and work my way backwards.
That's right. So if you see a squiggly line, that means on that line or somewhere before that line, you have a typing mistake. It could be 2 lines before that you forgot to close a quote or close a parentheses.
Exactly.
So where you see the squiggly means somewhere there or somewhere before that, you've got a syntax.
Yeah, that's basically, because Visual Studio and Python in turn are relatively forgiving. They're going to try and work with you. It's just finally reached a point where it finally just threw up its hand and said, I have no idea what you're trying to do here.
Yeah, when I got to here, I got confused. So somewhere back there, somewhere before this, there was a mistake. Sometimes the squiggle's right where the mistake is, but it does at least it's before that line.
Yep.
Yeah, which is helpful.
Getting a lot of Q&A of people saying, yeah, I've been doing this for 30 years and, still get lots of errors.
You know what? I said, you are not I don't think you're really a coder until you've made lots of errors. And the more mistakes you make, the better you're going to get at finding mistakes.
Yep.
And that's why I'm really good at finding mistakes in my code. Now, sometimes there'll be typing mistakes you make that aren't actually detected. You won't see a red squiggly. If you type in print hello world, which is incorrect because I would have to the IN there. So if that IN, I accidentally mistyped. But there's no red squiggly that appears if you type that into Visual Studio.
Exactly.
Instead, what happens is when you run the program, Visual Studio goes off and tries to execute this Python code. And the interpreter goes and says, I can't find a function called print.
Yep.
And at that point, it then throws an error and says, excuse me, there is no function with the name print that I have in this code.
We actually saw this in the last module, that when I had defined the function down below and then put the code up top, that when I went ahead to try and run it, Visual Studio didn't give me any red squigglies. In fact, Visual Studio was even nice enough to give me a bit of IntelliSense. And then when I ran it, that's when it said, oh, wait a minute, you've got a problem here.
That's right. So these types of errors, you'll get error messages at runtime. Again, this doesn't mean you're a bad coder. It just means welcome to programming.
Exactly.
Look at the error message. It does often give you a really good hint. And actually, one of the cool things about Visual Studio and Python is it actually gives you an arrow showing you the line of code which actually generated the error message to try and give you a hint. And again, that means the error message is there or before.
Yep.
Not necessarily exactly where it's pointing, but there before is where the error occurred.
Exactly.
I said, but do check the error message. Sometimes there are options to literally links right there to search for help on that error message. If you're really stuck, go to Bing, type in the exact error message, name print is not defined, copy that into Bing, and type in the word Python so it knows it's a Python error message that you got.
Yep.
And you may well find somebody who's post Stack Overflow, I'm getting this error message. Why am I getting this error message? And some awesome developer out there has come and said, well, you're getting that because, and boom, you've just solved your problem.
That's it.
Yeah. So the other thing you'll run into is logic errors. These are the nasty ones, I will be honest, because the problem is the code runs just fine. You don't get any error messages, but for some reason, you're not actually getting the output you expected.
My forehead is a little flatter because of those. Just thud, thud,
These
thud.
are the toughest ones to find because sometimes you don't even know they're there. We looked at a couple of examples of these yesterday. We talked about if you have a salary of $5,000 and a bonus of $500, and we calculate your paycheck, and we get back a result of $5,500,000. Because
I like that paycheck. I'm just saying.
And the problem was because we put quotes around our numbers, they were treated as strings. So the plus symbol, when you use a plus symbol to take this string plus this string, it concatenates the two strings together. If you take a number plus a number, it adds the numbers together. So we end up with a total of $5,500,000.
Again, if somebody who's writing the HR app for whatever company it is that I'm working for at any given time wants to make a mistake like that and give me $5 million all of a sudden,
you're in?
I am all for it. Sold.
We also talked another example yesterday. We were seeing the challenges of an if statement.
Yeah.
I want to write code that says if somebody is a gold card member and they're from the U.S. or Canada, I want to give them free benefits. And then you write the code and you say, if status equals gold card and country equals US or country equals Canada, give free benefits. And then you suddenly go, wait a second, I've got somebody here from Canada. Why is everybody from Canada getting free benefits? That shouldn't be happening. And then you realize it's because the and was executed before the or. So everybody who was from the US that has a gold card gets the benefits. The US people who don't have a gold card didn't get the benefits because they weren't U.S. and gold card. But then it said, or from Canada. So everybody from Canada got the free benefits. You're like, no. I want only the people who are gold card and are from U.S. or Canada. So just because I missed a set of parentheses in my combine and or statement, again, runtime error. Suddenly I accidentally gave free benefits to every single Canadian. Oh, I like that mistake.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, if you don't mind making that mistake for any hotel chain or airline I fly with,
should we just start requesting
that would be
mistakes
great.
we'd like people to
Yes, I think this is a good plan. Yes, I like that. So it's important that we have a way of handling errors. So said the logic errors, they're going to happen. How are you going to find those? Testing.
Yes.
You have to go through, test your code. The fact that it runs without an error doesn't mean it's working. So you have to test your code. You have to try different inputs. Make sure what comes out is what you expect based on what you enter. With ands and ors, try different combinations. Greater than, less than. Try smaller values, larger values, equal to. Try to break it, hack it. You know, it's really important to test.
Yes.
Now, the other thing that happens is you may have written your code absolutely correctly, and yet, and it's run and you've tested it a half dozen times and everything works. You've got this wonderful code that opens a file, reads all the contents of the file, displays it correctly, and then one day it crashes. Your user goes, the code doesn't work. And that's the day you go, oh wait, someone deleted the file. That's a different type of situation. Now you've got a runtime error that is only occurring occasionally when there's a specific situation. You've written your code correctly. You write a calculator program and a user tries to do division and enters 0. So your code is now trying to divide by 0. Well, you know what? Calculators generally don't like dividing by 0. Your program tries to read a file, and the file's not there one day. Your program's trying to perform a date calculation, and a user enters the wrong format or says 30th of February, or asks for the 15th month because they weren't paying attention to the date format.
Yep.
So when you have the code just crash and spew error messages all over the screen, that's a very poor experience for the person using it. And even if you're writing functions that you're going to use, it's really nice if a function handles errors in a graceful way as well. So what we're going to look at in this module is how can we add code to trap errors gracefully so they don't just crash, but we can control what happens if something predictable as an error occurs. Because there are some scenarios where we just know they're going to be trouble. Things like reading from a file. That's the kind of thing where I can almost predict one day the file won't be there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or you don't have permissions, or it's corrupt, or yeah.
Opening a file, that's one of those ones, you know what, always add error handling.
Yeah, exactly.
Standard.
Yeah, and really actually to take that one step further, basically the moment that you leave your application and try to contact something else, always add error handling. So, you know, to get a little bit more advanced, if you were going to try to call a web service, if you were going to try and connect to a database, anytime that you're leaving...
Anytime you're talking to the outside world.
Exactly, yeah. If you're going to open up the front door and go outside, make sure that you've got error handling.
Yeah, because you're depending on someone else now.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'd love to say we can trust others, but there you can't always rely on everybody else. So anytime you're calling someone else's code or someone else's database or someone else's file, yeah, you want error handling because one day they may not be there for you. So what I've got here on the screen, this is a very simple program. I wanted to have a nice, easy example we could all follow to start with. I've written a calculator program, and a user enters 2 numbers. Now, this is a very rudimentary calculator. It can only divide. So, so maybe it's a divider program.
It's a divider calculator.
Yeah. So the users enter 2 numbers. So we have just our basic, they input the first number, they input the second number. I convert those to numeric values because input returns what data type, Christopher?
Wait, I know this. String.
String, correct. So I convert them to numeric data types so that I can do math of them. Then I calculate a result, which is the first number divided by the second number. If I execute this code, it's going to work. Unless, right, I test it, it works, 6 divided by 2, 3.0, everything's looking great. Until, you know, we start messing with it. So let's get this up and running because then we can actually mess around with it and see what it does. I'm going to need a new project. All right, let's create module 14. We are on 14, error handling. Trying to use good names so that if those of you who are looking for the examples later. So we're going to have first number equals input, enter a number, and I'm just going to be trying a little lazy here, Control-C, Control-V, and that's going to be second number, input, enter another number, and then I am going to, I'm actually going to change my code a little bit. Again, I'm trying to be super efficient here. I'm being lazy. I'm going to convert them to float when I get them back right away. So I am taking the number that is returned as a string and immediately converting it into a number.
Okay.
So then I can take a result equals first number divided by the second number. Just because I want to get to the error handling. You guys have seen this stuff before. Hopefully this all looks familiar now. And then I'm just going to print the result on the screen. Really simple.
Okay.
Okay, I run my code. Phew, I got it right. Okay, no typos. Phew. I type in 5. I divide by 2. And it comes back with 2.5. So I go, yay, I'm done my code. I hand it in to my boss and I walk away. And I tell them to go give it to the users. And one day a user comes along and types in a value of 10 and tries to divide by 0 and crash.
Sound effects and all.
Yes, the user won't have Visual Studio. They're not going to see a little box pop up with code saying 0 division error occurred or anything like this. They're probably just going to see error messages all over the screen.
Yep.
But now, the nice thing about us as coders is we do have Visual Studio. And what I love is, again, if we zoom in a little bit here, you can actually see